As we go to your phone calls and thoughts, James is in Arizona. You're on Free Talk Live.
James in Arizona's back. I'm so happy.
On Monday, to your audience, Ian, I tried to bring up the Islamic State, and I hadn't even finished mentioning that second word before a so-called and hate-filled, venomous minister butted in and said, "Oh, come on, James. It's not like Christians haven't gone around chopping people's heads off." And so it got me to thinking, where on planet Earth is there a 30,000-strong young men dressed in black so-called Christian army chopping people's heads off? And
James, as I recall, you did a reasonably good job.
One for 1,000 years.
Hold on,
James.
James
I'm going to put him on hold because he did ask a question, and I presume that meant he wanted a response, but apparently it just meant he wanted to keep rambling.
Well,
go ahead, Mark.
He had specifically talked about how things were going currently and then how things had gone historically in the Middle East, as though historically in the Middle East, certainly they've been chopping heads off, and historically around the world they've chopped heads off. Chopping heads off is, frankly, a relatively old practice of putting people to death. Not a surprise.
And just before we bring him back, let's just not pretend that it's like a whole lot better to go and bomb a village or put bullets in people than it is to cut their heads off. I mean, the beheadings make for better video.
Right? How
get
many
me
of those
wrong.
people dropping the bombs would call themselves Christian? I bet
a
good
lot
amount
of them. Yeah, and a lot of people who voted and supported for it.
All right, back with James. Go ahead.
This is how two of them so-called ministers play Free Talk Live with James in Arizona. I get to talk for about 10 seconds, and then they take over the mic for a minute and say a bunch of stupid Shiite. But if you don't want to chicken out one of these days, Christopher Cantwell, why don't you tell one of your minister friends to shut the hell up and let me speak for more than 10 seconds?
Because the show's not about James in Arizona.
Yeah, all right, of course it's not. But
You've been speaking for the
talk about, and you interrupt me immediately.
Well, that's what we do here. I'm going to put you back on hold.
The idea is that people want to listen to us, right? And then we give you the privilege of engaging with us. Now, if you want to go on Blog Talk Radio or something like that and start the James in Arizona podcast,
I've recommended it. The guy loves to talk.
Yeah,
well,
and I think it'd actually be an entertaining program. Maybe he should consider doing it,
and
but
maybe
just hijacking the airwaves here.
Maybe he doesn't know this, but James has called back a number of times. He's got this habit of calling the show after the show.
Yeah,
where
leveling threats.
He'll call the back
threats
line. I would say they're close to threats, but not quite.
Cussing
he'll call the
out.
back line, and so the last couple times we've started to just record him, and he'll just rant for 5 minutes, and we've actually put the unedited rants onto the end of the podcast. So
I want people to know what this maniac does when they're not listening.
That plus the fact that I put him on. Mark, you don't want him to be put on. I'll put him on every time he calls into the show because, as far as I'm concerned, it's an open phone show.
Which
you can call
most
in.
shows would not.
They would
do.
not. Right. So we continue to give you airtime, James, but you won't even stop for a moment to allow someone to respond to a question you asked. So let's bring him back
probably
on.
Still talking.
Go ahead.
I listened to every word you losers had to say, but you do like to interrupt me after I've only briefly spoke and then go on and talk about me for ad nauseum for as long as you feel like, and then you accuse me of calling back and wanting to have something to say to you. And any of those so-called threats I've made, Mark, Edge, if you want to name them on the public airwaves, I'd be happy to respond to them. And I've been on every show I can.
Why were you calling tonight? Go now.
Seconds about Christopher Cantwell. Who my favorite moment from his aptly named Some Garbage podcast with The Edge is when he was reminiscent about being a 17-year-old kid going down to Harlem to buy drugs.
Yeah.
And he calls me a scumbag. What is that based on, Cantwell? Because I know for a fact, just having watched a YouTube video, that Boston Strong guy, he may be impolite and a loudmouth jerk to you, but I guarantee you he represents the sentiments of 99.9% of Keene, New Hampshire, that was a beautiful town before you freaking dirtbags.
Thanks for the call.
It's still a beautiful town, by the way. But I'll tell you what. Look, the guy down the street has been driving by our houses every single day, at least once a day, yelling at our houses. So one day I went outside. I managed to catch the SOB as he was driving away from screaming outside of my house, and I went down to go have a chat with the gentleman. And you know what? He didn't want to have a chat. He wanted to scream and yell and talk about the gun on my hip because apparently that made him and his wife a little nervous. Well, the gun on my hip is not a threat to anybody, who's not a threat to me. And of course, there was no violence that happened. It just said, hey, if you want to make noise in front of my house and you want to yell at me when I come chat with you, well, then fine. Let's make a whole bunch of noise in front of your house. And sure enough, the police came down and talked to both of us and said, hey, you got the right to yell at his house. You got the right to yell at his house. And nothing happened. But you know what? I haven't heard that SOB yell at our houses since then.
Not since then. Nope.
So this is the thing. Look, you've told the story before about we're at like a anti-war thing, and a guy comes up and tries to pick a fight with me. He pushes me, and we de-escalate the conflict, and this solves the problem.
Yeah, you did.
I think there's been enough effort to de-escalate the conflict with this SOB down the street. So you know what? I escalated the conflict, and I escalated it past a point that he wanted to deal with, and the conflict. Look, I'm not saying the conflict's resolved, but I haven't heard him screaming outside of my house.
I wouldn't have called what you did an escalation. I don't think it's an unfair thing to communicate with a neighbor that you don't appreciate something they're doing.
No,
hey,
I don't think it's appropriate.
Hey,
at all.
dude, I don't appreciate you screaming out at the top of your lungs outside of my house every day. And by the way, he wasn't technically screaming at your house; he was screaming at this house.
Right, but I hear it every single time, and he's trying to pin everything to me, and I'm like, look, I'm not those guys, so I don't want to hear it, and I'm certain that the guy Doug doesn't want to hear
it. And we're supposed to be the bad neighbors. I'm not going out screaming in front of anybody's house.
Yeah, exactly. And these guys, it's a perpetual. They talk about us being a disruption to the neighborhood, and then they disrupt the neighborhood. It's just ridiculous.
And by the way, I posted the video where you confront this guy on our Facebook, Google+, Twitter. You can go see that now. If you like, we'll see you tomorrow night, freetalklive.com, ChristopherCantwell.com.
Uh-huh. If you care, then why are you on the fucking public airwaves then? If you don't like me calling in, you fucking fat pig.
What? Because I'm on the public airwaves, I like talking to you.
Yeah. You like talking to people that agree with you because that's what you
No, I prefer to argue with people, but you don't make arguments. You just talk over people and call people shit. And I mean, like I don't know, what it is about you.
Listen to the last 5 minutes of your program and talk about talking over people, you fat fucking liar.
Okay.
Instantly. I had only spoken for 10 seconds. You all three got in on me.
Right, because we had 10 minutes left of the program, and people are listening for us.
Soon enough. You could not get off this planet soon enough. The world would be a better place. And I especially loved when you said that Mark Edge was a victim of fraud. The night he knocked somebody over the head and watched somebody kill him, and then give that guy a ride to the airport.
Well, yeah.
So to escape justice. Mark Edge is the one that's a victim of fraud. He still should be in jail for lying to the cops and obstruction of murder investigation. He still should be in jail. Everybody has a second chance in life. I agree. The question is where. He belongs in jail. He should minister there. Get the fuck off my planet, Mark Edge. And I don't believe you when you said you didn't commit the murder, like the paper says you did. I don't believe you, Mark Edge. I believe you participated in the murder, then gave the guy a ride to the airport.
Tell me the truth. You guys pay him, right? Like he's a character, right?
I wish that were true.
Like I've heard of Mark Levin and those guys doing stuff like that.
You want to know why I get in your faces? Because you're all fucking scumbags. Mark Edge is a victim of fraud. He knocked somebody over the head, watched him strangled to death, and then gave the guy a ride to the airport that murdered him. And he's a victim of fraud?
Well,
get the fuck off my planet, Cantwell. Drop dead. Seriously.
I'm not going to... Look, I can't...
Because you're that kind of scumbag that defends a murderer and thinks a guy that sleeps with a teenager is a minister.
I think I'm going to start sleeping with teenagers. I think that Ian's fucking right here.
Fucking shit. Hey, Leslie, when you're 35 and he's 55, you're going to wonder what the fuck was I doing with a loser that chases us down, meter maids, and draws chalk.
Would you prefer I fuck the meter maid?
And calls himself an activist.
He really would have
a... days you're going to grow up, Leslie.
He really doesn't need to have his own show. I mean, he can just talk and talk and talk and fucking talk.
That's right. I have a lot to say about you fucking scumbags
do you
and how the
think
world's
that
the worst place with
he
you
worked
on
up
it.
his jaw muscle by sucking dicks?
Give me a call whenever you want me to calm down and open your mind about libertarianism and all the other bullshit.
Are you going to teach me about libertarianism?
No, he loves Jesus, Cantwell. He would never suck a dick. He loves Jesus.
Oh, okay. Jesus wouldn't appreciate that. He'd tell you to go forth and sin no more, my son.
I've never sucked a man's dick. That's for sure.
All right, taking it in the ass, whatever.
But Jesus, he doesn't think that's any worse than me being attracted to a hot woman. But if I were doing a 17-year-old, I wouldn't want to meet Jesus because I'd know I'd be going to hell.
I'm pretty sure a lot of
Fuck you,
Jesus'
Ian.
friends were
Hey,
fucking
Ian, get the fuck
17-year-olds. It
off
was a
my
long time
planet,
ago, and that was pretty
17
much-
was middle-aged back then.
Yeah, like 17 was like an old
Drop dead.
bitch.
Get the fuck
You
off
were like,
my
I gotta
planet.
cash you in
Seriously.
for a 9-year-old.
Drop dead, Ian. You're a phony. You're a phony. You should be in jail, along with Cantwell and the definitely marked Edge.
Yo, shut the fuck up. Got a question for you.
Oh, he hung up on you.
Oh, that was so much fun. I appreciate
He just
James.
waited for somebody to like actually try to talk to him. So yeah, how about you?
He's like, you guys are just being
All right.
no. I'm just like, yo.
There we go.
Shut up.
All right. There's your latest episode of The After Show with James Whittakind from... Where the hell does he live in Arizona? I forget. I don't know. Somewhere in the Phoenix area.
All right, folks, you ain't got to go home, but you can't stay here.
If he calls back, we'll hit the record button again. Good night.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.